What's up, guys? Welcome back to the garage. Today we're back on the old OBS. We had some issues with slow drag starting. I think the starter's dragging. I was pretty mean to it whenever we were working on it, trying to fix the no start issue when we had the coolant sensor problem. And it's time to change it. So we're going to change it, but we're also going to upgrade. Let's check it out. We're going to do a little before start so you can see how bad the starter's dragging. Never mind, I guess it only does it when it's hot. We're still changing it though. Alright, so if you guys have seen the starter on these trucks, you know it's massive. It's a big, heavy duty guy. I did some research and some online searching and learned that apparently it's really simple to change over to the newer 98 plus Vortec starter. You just need some bolts that are the different length than the ones that are on the truck. So that's what we got here. It's much smaller than the one that's on the truck, but the bolt holes are supposed to match. It's supposed to be the same, supposed to bolt right up and go. We will find out shortly. If all of this works, I'll be sure to put the description in the description. I'll put the link to the part number for the starter and for the bolts. I'm hoping this works. From what I've read, it spins faster, it starts quicker. It's all around a great upgrade. So that's what we're going to try to do. You saw in the video just a second ago, it started up just fine. But a little bit of history. In one of the three previous videos, we went through some troubleshooting process associated with the truck not starting. It took me probably about a week of troubleshooting and testing, trying to figure out what's going on. It finally come down to the coolant temperature sensor had went crazy and was telling the truck that it's really, really cold outside when it wasn't, and dumping fuel into the intake, into the throttle body, and flooding it out on start. So during that process, we were on the starter a lot, trying to get it to start, trying to get it to run, trying to figure out what was going on. And we were mean to the starter. We were. And it did make some grinding noise and drag for, I don't know, 2 or 3 days after that. And I expected to have to change the starter then, but then it quit. It was starting up perfectly, starting up fine. So I left it alone. And then last week, I guess I took the truck just to the gym, started up fine, got to the gym, left the gym, started up fine, went, stopped and got gas. And when I got gas and went to start it again, it barely started. It sounded like the battery had went out. It was a very low drag. I was expecting it to start clicking. So I immediately went over to the local hardware store or local auto parts store and had them test the battery. And he said it come back fine. It was actually a little over what the voltage it should be. So then he tested the alternator. It come back fine, which I expected because the gauge on the dash is reading above 14 volts when it's running. So that should be fine. And he mentioned, well, maybe your starter's dragging. And then that reminded me that it was dragging after the fiasco with the cooling sensor. So we're going to go ahead and change it. We'll see what happens. I don't want to run the risk of it getting broke down somewhere. You can't get under this truck. With a 4.6 drop, you can't get under there to bang on it with a hammer. It's not possible. So we got to fix it. So we're going to fix it now, and we'll see how it works. Let's go. First thing we're going to do is go ahead and disconnect this battery, positive battery cable. There is a huge wire that runs right down to the starter. You can see it right there. If you take it off of that starter and you let it hang and it touches the frame or anything else, you're going to have fireworks. So we're going to disconnect it up here just to make sure. I'm going to lose all my presets and all that junk. It sucks, but got to do what we got to do. So we're going to take that off first, and then we'll get started. All right, battery is disconnected. We're under the truck here. Starter's on the passenger side right here next to the oil pan. 2 big bolts up here at the top. Take it off, and then once you get it off, you've got a couple of nuts for the wires. You've got to get those loose so that you can move it all. So there should be 2 bolts, 2 wires, the main wire and then the switch wire. I'm gonna go ahead and get that thing disconnected. We'll have a look at it. Not a lot of room down here, so I'm probably just going to do it and then show you what I did after. So we'll get on that and then we'll switch it out. All right, start us out. A couple of things to note. This wire that I told you runs from up here all the way down there. It's connected by a couple of hold down brackets. there's not enough slack in the wire to get the starter down far enough to get the nut off of it. So you have to undo these. There's a bracket here and then one back there, so that this cable, this wire, can kind of feed through that hole back there to get the starter down far enough to get to the bolt. And then you're going to want something to set it on because it's heavy while you undo the bolts. You don't want it hanging from the wires because one of those wires is really small and it's loomed together with what looks like a oil temp sensor. It's a very small gauge wire. You don't want to pull on that and rip it. So just a pro tip from a non-pro: undo those brackets to let that wire go down further in the hole so that you're able to get to the nuts easier. Now we're going to take it to the back and we're going to check it out, compare it to the other starter, make sure the bolt holes line up, make sure the terminals line up, and then we'll get the other one installed. I'm optimistic, but I also have my doubts. The bolt holes here look to be roughly the same distance apart and the same angle, but this opening on this end here is much smaller, so there's going to be a gap. I don't know if that's going to matter. The gear drive in there seems to be a little bigger than the original. I'm not really sure if that matters. We've got the same terminals over here, so it looks like your hot wire is going to go to this one and your switch wire is going to go to that one, where we had hot wire here and switch wire here on the other one. There's probably some type of a ground there. We'll just snug that up. We're not going to worry about that because there's not one on this side. Also, the bolts, let me get these bolts out real quick. The bolts are slightly shorter. The important part is this rough spot, this curling in the shaft here. That's what goes into the block and locates the starter in the right location. And you want that to go through here. That's snug. And just stick out past the end. I'm not going to force it because it's tight, but when you tighten it down, it'll pull it in there. And that's what locks the starter down where there's no slack and puts it in the right location. So we're going to get under there and get this thing connected up and then see how it starts. Fingers crossed. All right, new starter bolted up. It doesn't quite fill the hole there with the flywheel, but I don't think it has to. Cables connected the way they're supposed to. Bolts went in all the way. I cinched them down with the ratchet. I need to look up the torque specs to make sure I got them right. But for now, we're going to just test fire it real quick and make sure that it starts and doesn't impact the flywheel, or, you know, got to check the mesh and all that. So we're going to go ahead and reconnect the battery cable just temporarily. See if it starts before we put all of this other stuff back together. And then once it's good and starts, then we'll put everything back together and check it out. All right, battery reconnected, moment of truth. Let's see what it sounds like. Cross your fingers, guys. Hey, that sounded pretty good. It has a totally different sound. It's not the sound I'm used to. These trucks have a very unique starting sound, and it's a little different, but this is I think a gear reduction direct drive starter, so it's going to sound a little different, but I'm going to hit it again just to make sure that wasn't a fluke. But so far, so good. Let's cross our fingers again one more time. 1, 2, 3. And for this truck on a cold start, that's about right. It takes a second or a second and a half to actually kick over, sometimes longer if it's cold, like outside cold. But this truck does, when it's warmed up, it starts so quick and so easy. You breathe on the key and it fires right up. You don't even have to hold it at all. So I'm hoping that's still going to be the case once we get it fixed, or once we get everything put back together. I'm going to go ahead and put the wire back together there, look up those torque specs and torque the starter real quick. And then I think we can mark this one off the list and it'll be done. All right, we got those brackets remounted, got the battery reconnected, everything's good. Try to start it one more time just to make sure. something with a starter is kind of, you know, want to make sure it works good. So one more time. All right, I want to get it down off the jack stands, get it out of the garage, and this one will be, mark this one done. All right, we got one little go back on this one. It looks like the bracket for that starter is in a different location, which has pushed this main wire up to where it's contacting the exhaust manifold. I took it around the block, put some heat in the motor, see if the starter still started with some spunk once it was warm, and it did, but I got out and smelled a smell, and that's what I found. So I'm going to let it cool down and climb back under there and see if I can bend that down somehow to get it off the exhaust manifold. And there's another wire further back there that I need to make sure is not touching as well. So once it cools down a little bit, we'll get under there and check it out, and then this one will be done. All right, I had to slide in here dirty because I can't fit on the creeper when we're on just these little ramps. It's just not tall enough. But I was able to rearrange these wires a little and get them down off the manifold, and then I pulled the big one down off the manifold, bent the tab there, the starter tab, or the wire tab down a little bit to where there's a couple inches of gap now. I'm just going to use this screwdriver to scrape the plastic bits that stuck to the manifold so it doesn't sneak, and then I think we're good. There's a couple inches of gap there, and heat's going to go mostly up, so scrape that off real quick, and then it'll be done. All right, guys, thank you for hanging out with me, getting this old OBS back on the road. It was a pretty simple project, but it was something that was kind of an emergency. It's not a fun project, but it's a project and an upgrade all the same. So I'm glad it's done. The truck's going to be more reliable now, and I appreciate you guys. I do have some fun stuff coming up, though. We've got a onboard air system for the air shocks we installed a couple of videos back. That's going to allow us to control the pressure in the air shocks in the rear from the dash. So when we get loaded with whatever I'm carrying around, or if we're just on rough roads and I need a little more clearance, I can hit a button under the dash, air up the rear end, and give myself better clearance for all of these potholes around Houston. We also have some really cool retro, like slapper style traction bars I'm going to put on. The truck's not really powerful enough to need them, but I think they look cool, so we're going to slap those on too. That'll probably be all in the next video, so y'all stay tuned. If you guys do like this content, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. You guys have a good one and rock on.